Yashodanandana Jaya Braja Janaranjana Jaya Yashodanandana Jaya Jaya Braja Janaranjana Jamuna Tiravanachari Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Kunja Bihari Jamuna Tiravanachari Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Gopi Janavalava Jaya Girivaradari Jaya Girivaradari Gopi Janavalava Jaya Girivaradari Jaya Girivaradari Jaya Jaya Yashodanandana Jaya Braja Janaranjana Jaya Yashodanandana Jaya Braja Janaranjana Jamuna Tiravanachari Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Kunja Bihari Jamuna Tiravanachari Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jai Shri Shri Radha Madhava Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Damatar Ki Jai Jai Om Vishnu Pada Paramhamsa Brivajakacharya Astottara Sata Shri Srimad Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai Jai Om Vishnu Pada Paramhamsa Brivajakacharya Astottara Sata Shri Srimad Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai Krantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai Nittai Gaura Premanandi Hari Hari Bo Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Divamrita Swamini Tanamane Jai Purvaraksham Cha Bhakta Char Bhavinata Pratata Pikanunyam Yasasavich Tenama Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamini Tinamane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharine Nirvishesa Shunyavadi Paschatyarishatarine Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Today we're reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam in its 5th canto, chapter 14, text number 36, apparently. Continuing to hear from Jadbharat about this material world, which he describes as being like a great forest of enjoyment. But anyone who's ever been in the forest, like for real, knows that it's not some beautiful Hollywood place. Nature will straight up kill you without a second thought. So when we hear the forest of enjoyment, we should not think, oh, this sounds nice, beautiful. Little squirrels running about, bird song, fresh berries growing from bushes. And no, nature is brutal. Nature is rough. And so his description of this material world like a forest of enjoyment means a place where we become lost, impoverished, distraught, and eventually die. So let's keep that context in mind. With this text 36, he says, Kvachit kshinadanaha shaya sanashana dyupabhoga vihino yavad apratilabda manorato pagata dane vasita matis tatastato vamanadini janat abhilabhate. Word for word says, Kvachit, sometimes, kshina danaha, not having sufficient money. Shaya asana ashana adi. Interesting. Shaya asana ashana adi. Accommodations for sleeping, sitting, or eating. Upabhoga, of material enjoyment. Vihinaha, being bereft. Yavat, as long as. Apratilabdha, not achieved. Manorata, by his desire. Upagata, obtained. Adhane, in seizing by unfair means. Avasita matihi, whose mind is determined. Tataha, because of that. Tataha, from that. Avamana adini, insults and punishment. Janat, from the people in general. Abhilabhate, he gets. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Sometimes, having no money, the conditioned soul does not get sufficient accommodations. Sometimes he doesn't even have a place to sit, nor does he have the other necessities. In other words, he falls into scarcity. And at that time, when he is unable to secure the necessities by fair means, he decides to seize the property of others unfairly. When he cannot get the things he wants, he simply receives insults from others and thus becomes very morose. Purport. It is said that necessity knows no law. When the conditioned soul needs money to acquire life's bare necessities, he adopts any means. He begs, borrows, or steals. Instead of receiving these things, he is insulted and chastised. Unless one is very well organized, one cannot accumulate riches by unfair means. Unless one is very well organized, one cannot accumulate riches by unfair means. So Prabhupada is implying that the reverse must also be true, that if you are well organized, then you can accumulate riches by unfair means. There are no shortage of examples of very well organized people accumulating riches by unfair means. Even if one can continue with the purport, even if one acquires riches by unfair means, he cannot avoid punishment and insult from the government or the general populace. Again, no shortage of examples there. There are many instances of important people's embezzling money, getting caught, and being put in prison. Not enough instances, if you ask me. One may be able to avoid the punishment of prison, but one cannot avoid the punishment of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who works through the agency of material nature. This is described in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 7, text number 14. Daivi hiyesha gunamayi mama maya duratyaya. Nature is very cruel. That was just what we were talking about. Nature is very cruel. She does not excuse anyone. When people do not care for nature, they commit all kinds of sinful activities, and consequently, they have to suffer. Jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Om Jnana Timarandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Svaparantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Parakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Cham Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Paran Sahagana Valalita Shri Vishakanvitam Scham Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kantana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sutta Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So again, sometimes having no money, the conditioned soul does not get sufficient accommodations. A story which is all too familiar, especially right here in the land of the free and the home of the brave. Bear with me, devotees, because Prabhupada indulged in some criticism of economies. We'll do a little bit also, following in the footsteps of His Divine Grace. But especially here in America, there is remarkable numbers of homelessness, people who do not get sufficient accommodations, despite the United States being by far the largest and strongest economy. So strong is that economy of the United States that if you were to rank them, the United States would be number 1 in the world, China number 2, the state of California alone would be number 3. And I'm pretty sure New York would be number 4. It's just, even more than most countries. And even within this country, there are some private corporations themselves worth many, many more times money than other countries in this world. So there's no shortage of dollars. And yet we see that there are many people who do not have sufficient accommodations. The homelessness levels, I don't have exact statistics on me, but anyone who's lived in a major urban city in America knows the statistics. Even here in our state college, remarkably, the numbers are increasing. I spoke with a sociologist the other day, a professor of sociology here at Penn State. Very interesting person. She was just talking so much about how, obviously our governments are failing to provide security. If that's like the number one reason for government, that's number one purpose, it's certainly failing to provide security for huge numbers of people in this country. It's arguing that we can no longer depend on the public sector to do anything like that. It really only depends on
charities from private sector that really accomplishes anything worthwhile to alleviate this sort of condition where people don't have sufficient accommodations, not even a place to nor other necessities. And of course, the inevitable result of that is crime, because as Prabhupada quotes in the purport, he's quoting the general public, a common phrase, ipsi dixit, vox populi. He says that necessity knows no law. And so when people cannot get even sufficient bare necessities, then they'll resort to crime. And it is a cruel population who looks at those people involved in crime out of necessity and says, well, they're just bad people. The problem is that they are the wrong ethnic group, or the problem is that they didn't make all the perfect right decisions in life, or the problem is we're born in the wrong place at the wrong time. It's a cruel perspective, and I would argue it will cause all of us to suffer. And yet, that's the trend in Kali Yuga, to blame individuals for being punished by nature. They do not require more punishment. Nature is very cruel, as Prabhupada says in this purport. People are suffering at the hands of nature, and it's very difficult to overcome. Daivihiyesha gunamayi, mama maya dharatya. It says it's so hard to overcome the stringent laws of nature. If you slip up even once in this world, especially at the point in the Kali Yuga, post-pandemic, it's like a whole new era of economic hardship for many people in the world. If you slip up even once, you find yourself at the hands of a very cruel nature, which is very to overcome. The statistics are abundant about how many people, now in the United States, over 60% of people live paycheck to paycheck. That means, just missing out on one paycheck would cause sufficient hardship. Even before the pandemic, I don't know what the latest is now, but even back in 2019, it was said that over 50% of people in America have less than $1,000 in savings. Meaning, one unfortunate trip to the hospital can just cause total bankruptcy. And so what we're going to see inevitably as a result, as Prabhupada says here, is that more and more people will have to resort to crime and accumulating money by unfair means. But Prabhupada says, unless you're well organized, you can't accumulate riches by unfair means. I think therein he's referring to the sort of petty crime that desperate individuals do, where they try to steal something, is largely unsuccessful. People suffer so much when they're caught, or whatever. Of course, in this country, there's not so much breaking and entering into homes because there's so many guns. It's not worth the risk. But the latest thing that people are doing is stealing cars using radio relays. So many of our keys now for cars, they have these RFIDs, these radio frequency identification devices, so that just being near the car, in the car, allows it to unlock or even to start the car. And some clever thieves found to use devices to relay that radio signal even farther, so that even if the key is inside a person's home, they can use a device to relay the signal of that key a farther distance, maybe 50 yards or something, so that then they can get inside the car and start it and drive off with the car while the key's just, sitting in your kitchen counter or something. And I read this interesting article about how they steal cars. It's remarkable how quickly they just immediately drive it to a port, put it in a shipping container, and ship it over to Asia or Africa or something where it's resold, so that, there's no chance of finding it. And then they find some way to make a new key for it. So, a lot of desperation to try to accumulate riches by unfair means. And you can only do it if you're organized. So here Prabhupada's saying, if you're organized, then you can accumulate riches by unfair means. And of course, we see that time and time again. bear with me, devotees. We have to indulge in a little bit of criticism of this material energy so that we can, in contrast, see it's so much better to just surrender to Krishna and live simply. So as Prabhupada says, unless you're well organized, you can't accumulate riches by unfair means. And there are unlimited examples of people being very organized and accumulating riches by unfair means, both in the private and public sector. In the public sector, we see this artificial inflation going on all the time. Money printing. Prabhupada comments on that in one of his short books, Elevation to Krishna Consciousness. I'll read a little quote here about, there's something that everybody's talking about these days. Again, especially post-pandemic, because during the initial stages of this pandemic, the government, the Federal Reserve Bank the Treasury saw the opportunity to print an additional money, something like 40%. I'm gonna have to find a reference for that, but something like 40% of all US dollars already in circulation were then printed digitally, of course, at the beginning of the pandemic, which causes, of course, huge inflation. When you increase the money supply, just makes all of it less. There's already so much US dollars, so many US dollars in circulation, and then they just printed approximately 40% of that quantity more. And of course, with this huge scam in the form of payment protection, personal payment protection loans or something, this PPP loans, it was almost just handed straight into the hands of wealthy business owners in this country. It's a whole nother thing. I don't want to get into just digging up too many specific issues, but the whole thing's just frustrating. It's a frustrating mess, and most of us are not benefiting from it. So here's Srila Prabhupada's statement, even 60, 70 years ago, in a small book he wrote, Elevation to Krishna Consciousness. He said about the motivation for money, he says, consequently, this is Srila Prabhupada now, not Yasodeva. Prabhupada says, consequently, although there is no lack of money in the world, there is a scarcity of peace. So much human energy is being diverted to making money, for the general population has increased its capacity to make more and more dollars. But in the long run, the result is that this unrestricted and unlawful monetary inflation has created a bad economy all over the world and has provoked us to manufacture huge and costly weapons to destroy the very result of such cheap money making. Many of you have heard His Holiness Devamrita Swami often referencing just the United States alone and what they spend on its nuclear armament. Recently, they have allocated to the tune of $1 trillion just for an upgrade and a modernization of the nuclear armament of the United States military. I mean, it already exists. The United States already has far more nuclear warheads than the second place nuclear warhead holder, which is Russia. I did actually save something about that, but I don't want to bore you all with too many statistics about nuclear proliferation. Oh yeah, I do have one here. Very quickly, the number of nuclear armaments stockpiles in the world. Although there actually was a huge, push for nuclear disarmament, in the 80s and 90s, that trend has now reversed. So the number of nuclear arms was going down for a long time, for about 20, almost 30 years. But now the trend is reversed and countries decided, no, we just love it. We're going to keep making them again. So now there's an increasing supply. In the world total, there's some 15,000 different nuclear arms. And of those, the United States has about a little less than half. And then Russia, wow, Russia's winning nowadays. Look at that. Where are the exact numbers? There we go. Russia's winning the nuclear arms race. So that whole Cold War thing, waste of time. Right now, Russia has 5,889 deployable strategic warheads, whereas the United States has 5,244. So, of course, here in America, we don't love losing to the Russians. In tune with George Orwell's brothers, have to have an enemy somewhere to justify nuclear military spending. And so recently, the United States government has allocated $1 trillion to the upgrade of the nuclear capacities of the United States military. Haribo, Haribo. Where was it? I was just reading Prabhupada. Oh, no, I lost that quote I had. Hold on. Oh my gosh. I was reading this nice quote from Srila Prabhupada in Elevation of Krishna Consciousness. What happened to that? There we go. So continue on with Prabhupada's quote from Elevation to Krishna Consciousness, where he's talking about unlawful monetary inflation has created a bad economy all over the world and has provoked us to manufacture huge and costly weapons to destroy the very result of such cheap money making. The leaders of the big money-making countries are not really enjoying peace, but are making plans to save themselves from imminent destruction by nuclear weapons. In fact, huge sums of money are being thrown into the sea by way of experiments with these dreadful weapons. Such experiments are being carried out not only at huge costs, but also at the cost of many lives. In this way, the nations are being bound by the laws of karma. When men are motivated by the impulse for sense gratification, whatever money is earned is spoiled, being spent for the destruction of the human race. The energy of the human race is thus wasted by the laws of nature because of man's aversion to the Lord, who is actually the proprietor of all energies. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. This excerpt is almost the exact same as this purport, which Prabhupada would have written even decades later. So it's remarkable, consistent Srila Prabhupada's messages. He's so consistent. And that's why, it's one of many reasons why he's so effective in changing the minds of people. So in both this excerpt and in this purport, Prabhupada's saying nature has its own way. Nature has its way of punishing those who accumulate money by unfair means. Nature is very cruel and will not excuse anyone. We can't win. If your definition of winning is to get more than what is needed, Ishavasyam idam sarvam yat kinchit jagat jagat tena tak tena bunjitaha yat kinjat yat. Anyway, the Ishopanishad says that everything belongs to the Lord, and you get something that's allocated to you. There's a certain amount that you deserve as a result of your karma. If you try to get more by unfair means, nature will punish you. Prabhupada says, even if you don't see it in this life, it will happen to the person in the next life. They will get punishment. The people around you will be punished. Nature itself will suffer and will retaliate by kicking your little hiney to the curb, or kicking all of us to the curb. You can't win against nature if your definition of winning means to get more than what is needed. And dear devotees, let's be honest, so many of us have become convinced that we need more, because that's the trend in society right now. It's like an infatuation. It's like a disease. Everyone thinks that they need more and more and more. And they go on social media and they look at this person enjoying so much, even though their images are all like edited and photoshopped and whatnot to make it look like they're constantly enjoying luxuries. And then people look and they feel desperation that I need more and I need more. And they try to accumulate money by unfair means. In so many cases, just to get any money means you have to take from somebody else by lying, by cheating, by stealing. The means of accumulating money fairly is shrinking. Can't think of so many means that are fairly accumulated. It's hard to find honest work. And the larger the organization, as is being implied by Srila Prabhupada here, the larger the organization, the more we just take for granted that there must be some unfair means. I was just listening to this amazing story on NPR about what is the term they had for it? Of course, we all know a history of slavery economies in the world, which, although we like to claim that slavery economies are gone, actually slavery has increased since the end of so-called slavery economies. Slavery has increased all over the world. I've said this so many times, I'm sorry for just repeating it, but 1 in every 150 people in the world is in some sort of forced labor. The definition is broad. It's not just like chains and whips these days, but any sort of forced labor is one in which a person is under threat of, withholding pay in order to keep them within a job. Or pay is actually withheld to keep people within a job. That happened right here in State College. I'm sorry, I'm going off on so tangent. There's just so much to say about how unfair and how cruel money accumulation is in this world. But right here in State College, there's a restaurant down the street, La Plaza Mexicana. It's a chain. They've got restaurants, like 30, 40 restaurants around the country. And they were accused of withholding pay, which is very, very common in this country, withholding paychecks in order to keep people on the job. And say, oh, I'll give you your paycheck. I can't give it to you right now. I have to give it to you next month. And so, you have to stick around in this job in order to get that pay that you're on. And this is one kind of forced labor. It's not nearly as bad as some of the other things that are happening, especially over in Asia, Southeast Asia. But right here in State College. So that would be, according to the definition by this UN report, a kind of forced labor or slavery. Fortunately, in this case, the workers of this restaurant, La Plaza Mexicana, they were successful in getting retribution. And now the chain has to pay out like 150 million in withheld wages. In other countries, there is actual, confinement. You probably, many of us heard about, the big World Cup arena being built in Qatar, and how there was immigrant labor, much of which was from India. And these companies that are managing the construction, the contractors for the construction of this World Cup arena, were holding on to people's passports and their documents and things so that they can't leave the country, and then they're forced to live in these little shacks and stuff, which is about as close to classic slavery as we can imagine. And in Bangladesh recently, of course, there's been a lot of revolt by garment workers. So much of our fast fashion has to come from Bangladesh because it's just so cheap. It's like 60, 70, 80% of the economy of Bangladesh, which, by the way, is Lord Chaitanya's hometown. I mean, he performed many pastimes there, but now it's a place of slavery. And so there's been a lot of protests going on by the garment workers in Bangladesh. And because the politicians are, all investors in the garment companies, that's like the whole economy of Bangladesh. Obviously, the politicians aren't going to do anything to improve working conditions. And so the people have organized and they're fighting. But in countries like Bangladesh, the police can just come and kill you if you don't go to work. So that's been happening a lot. It's been fights and protests breaking out, resulting in many, many deaths of people who don't want to work under unfair conditions. So that takes a lot of organization. That's Prabhupada's point here. It's a lot of organization required to accumulate riches by unfair means. And so now we just take it for granted that any company, even in this country, that's very big and successful, must have some unfair means of accumulating that money. Even some countries that exist now are very successful and are considered like, pillars of American ingenuity and our individual capitalistic spirit, are actually successful because of slavery. U.S. Steel, the backbone of the United States, U.S. Steel. Oh, you go to Pittsburgh and it's all U.S. Steel. Less than 100 years ago was using slavery in the form of, what was the term NPR was using? Felony contracts, conscripted felons or something. It still happens in some states today, whereby felons who are in jail, they are forced into labor in the United States today. In the case of this particular country, U.S. Steel, they used so many felons and worked them to death And then this very interesting investigative reporter who's going around and uncovering graves of people where the bodies that died in the course of doing this forced labor were discarded of by the U.S. Steel Corporation. This investigative reporter is like exhuming those graves and getting the evidences that this was actually the person who was conscripted as a felon to U.S. Steel to do labor, digging up iron ore or whatever, and then just, dying and being discarded. So still in the United States, in some states, felon conscription is legal, and that's for labor. So slavery is still the big in thing. And it's remarkable that for all the rah about capitalism as being like so much more superior than to the feudalism of the past and the slavery economies of the past, our capitalism today still depends on slavery. And so, I don't know. I don't want to get too political about whether or not capitalism is going to end and we should do something better, because Prabhupada was also very much opposed to communism. They're all bad ideas. Anytime economies get big, it's just become such a mess. But at least we should know this, that despite all the rah capitalism, if it depends upon slavery, capitalism, if we need slaves to keep it working, then we don't really have capitalist economies. It's like putting a 4-cylinder engine inside a Tesla Model S and saying, look, I'm driving a Tesla. No, it's not. We don't really have capitalist economies because there's so much forced labor. There's so much unfair accumulation of money by organization, both in the private and public sector. And there's so much artificial monetary inflation, as Prabhupada is saying time and time again. Now, for the Krishna conscious portion of this Bhagavatam class, I've laid the groundwork for segueing into why we should surrender to Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And that is, Krishna consciousness gives us the means for solving the economic problem. And what does that mean? Simple living and higher thinking, recognizing that Krishna gives us enough. Satisfied with our connection with Krishna means we will not need to accumulate more than we need by unfair means. In this Bhagavatam, the first canto, chapter 5, text number 18, I think, is one of my most favorite statements, which we were discussing in our Bhagavad Gita class last night at the Bhakti Yoga Center, wherein Vyasadeva says, Tasyaiva heto prayateta kovido yad brahmatam tad labhate uparyada. Hold on. Boy, am I rusty. First canto, chapter 5, text number 18. He says, Tasyaiva heto prayateta kovido nalabhyate yad brahmatam uparyada talabhyate dukavad anyata sukham kalena sarvatra gabhiraram hasan. This is brilliant economic advice for the philosophically inclined and intelligent progressive spiritualists. That's all of us. This is the solution to the economy problem. He says, persons who are actually intelligent and philosophically inclined should endeavor only for that purposeful end which is not obtainable even by wandering from the topmost planet, Brahmaloka, down to the lowest planet, Patala. As far as happiness derived from sense enjoyment is concerned, it can be obtained automatically in course of time, just as in course of time we obtain miseries, even though we do not desire them. Dear devotees, please contemplate this verse very, very deeply. It is one for intelligent and philosophically inclined people. We must contemplate it. Yasodeva says that the sense enjoyment you want for the body, it comes automatically in course of time. It's the result of your karma. It does not make much difference whether you work hard to accumulate more than you need and to get something that's really fancy and luxurious. It doesn't make any difference in terms of the sense enjoyment that you will enjoy. Whether you're wearing $200 designer jeans or cheap replacement genes from Goodwill, the amount of happiness that you will enjoy will be the same. This takes a lot of intelligence and philosophical inclination to understand. Because especially the Western American mindset is that you work more and you get more and you'll be more happy. You might work more and get more, but you won't be more happy. Yasodeva says here, try to understand the happiness that you deserve as a result of your karma will automatically, whether you have expensive things or inexpensive things, whether you have a lot or whether you have a little, the happiness that you deserve will come automatically. How do we know that? Just see the contrast. The misery comes automatically without our endeavor. That's how you know. None of us endeavor for some sort of misery. I really, really, really want to experience pain and suffering today. We don't make plans for that. We don't work hard for it. We don't read books about how to get more miseries, and yet they come automatically. So Vyasadeva is saying, try to see that the happiness you want from sense gratification, it all comes automatically. Doesn't make a whole lot of difference whether you've got some palatial mansion or a modest accommodation. You will get the same amount of happiness. This has been corroborated by modern science too. But I don't have time to just get into every interesting scientific research and every statistic. But this has been corroborated by modern science, that there's a happiness cap, a limit to how much your happiness increases by getting more money. And it's relative to average incomes in a particular country. So in America, the number is the highest. Your happiness can increase up to the level of making about $125,000 to $150,000 a year. After that, an increase in income does not make an increase in happiness. We're using a very loose definition of happiness, of just being sense gratification, of course. After that, there's no increase in happiness by getting more money. Of course, that's still a lot more than most people make in America. That would put you in like the top 6 percentile to make $150,000 a year. Maybe 10 percentile. But then it's relative to the income of a particular country. In other countries, you make a certain amount and your happiness doesn't increase after that. We are devotees of Krishna. We need to be intelligent and philosophically inclined and recognize that it's not worth the effort to try to get more money by unfair means. Yasodeva is saying, you're going to get a certain amount of happiness as a result of your karma. It's not worth it to try to work hard and to get more by unfair means. It's not going to increase your happiness. And the evidence for that is that you're getting a certain amount of misery and suffering without working for it, without endeavoring for it. Doesn't matter your plan making, doesn't matter your book reading or listening to motivational speeches or lectures about how to get more misery. It's just going to happen anyway. The same with your enjoyment. It will come automatically. It's not worth the effort. It's not worth the effort. Devotees, I was talking about this with incredible, intelligent students last night. 2 doctorate students, one in mechanical engineering, one in oil and energy, and one anthropology student in particular. And they were just like, yes, this is absolutely true. I can see that in my life, those times when I put in a lot of effort to try to get this thing that I thought was going to make me happy, when I finally got that thing, it was almost as if it didn't matter if it happened or not. There wasn't a noticeable increase in my happiness, as if it didn't even matter if it happened. They were revealing like they're having this aha moment. Yeah, I worked really hard. I wanted to accomplish this thing, get this particular thing. And then when I got it, it's like it didn't make any difference. It's not worth the effort to try to accumulate more by unfair means. And yet in this verse, text number 18 of the 5th chapter of the 1st canto, Vyasadeva is giving a positive injunction that one should endeavor. He says persons who are actually intelligent and philosophically inclined should endeavor only for that purposeful end, which is not obtainable anywhere in this material universe. In other words, one should endeavor for Krishna consciousness and not worry about, am I going to get enough money to get all the happiness that I want in this world? One should work by some honest means, according to one's dharma, and just be satisfied with the amount that comes while prioritizing hearing and chanting about Krishna, service to Krishna. Let us not be bewildered by the apparent trend of getting more and more than you need. Let's not be bewildered by the habits of consumption and social comparison. Devamrita Swami said that these are the powerful forces that drive people to accumulate more than they need. Habits of consumption and social comparison makes us think, I need more, I need more, I need more. We are intelligent and philosophically inclined. We should recognize that I don't need to worry about that stuff. Let me just work honestly, according to my dharma, and whatever comes is enough. My focus, my investment is in Krishna's service. That purposeful end, which is not obtainable even by wandering from the topmost planet, Brahmaloka, down to the lowest planet. We're talking about something which is not material. We're talking about something which is spiritual and which is therefore an unlimited resource. The money supply is limited. That's why they print more. It causes all sorts of problems, like what's happening in Argentina right now. Such hyperinflation that this new, radical president just said, we're going to stop using pesos. Now we're just using US dollars because their inflation is just crazy. Because it's a limited resource, there's going to be so many problems. But the devotional service to Krishna is an unlimited resource. That's where we should invest our heart, our intelligence, our lust. Let's not give up the lust for more money. Let's have a lust for unlimited devotional service. And that solves the economic problem, at least on our individual level. I don't know if we're going to be able to convince society in general to solve the economic problem on a global level. Vote for me, and this will be my platform. Text number 18 of the 5th chapter of the 1st canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. That would be my platform if I could get some sort of political position in this world. That's the economy I would try to push. It would be satisfied with whatever we get by honest means, and instead to invest our heart and our attention in service to Krishna, which is the unlimited resource that we are really lusty for. Otherwise, as Prabhupada's saying in this purport and the excerpt from Elevation to Krishna Consciousness, nature is very cruel, and she will punish all of us for the unfair accumulation of riches, for the rape of Mother Earth, which is really the whole context for Krishna's appearance. There's the raping of Mother Earth going on, and we'll all suffer as a result in this life and in the next. All right. Thanks for listening to my opinions about economies. Anytime we talk about big money, it's always like borderline conspiracy, because there's so many things that are happening, beyond our purview. It's hard to even know for sure what the powers that be are doing with money. We're all just like little pawns in this game for ambitious men to get so much more than they need because they think it will save them from death. My last point about crazy people thinking they'll be saved from death. I grew up in Silicon Valley, California, where there's no shortage of crazy rich people. And there's always been this thing about how, this really rich guy is going to, fund the next breakthrough in medical science that will live forever. They've always been talking about that in my 37 years I can remember. Immortality is just around the corner. Our little startup firm, our venture capital firm is going to, create the pill for immortality or whatever. Now there's this new guy. He's been around for a while, Andreessen. And he's just kind of like revitalized the new billionaire obsession with immortality. And the reason for bringing this up is that that's so much of the huge motivation for ambitious men, and maybe even a few ambitious women, accumulating riches by unfair means in numbers that are so incomprehensible and unnecessary. It comes down to the fear of death. So many of them honestly think within their head that they're going to conquer over death if they can just get enough money to figure out how to stop death. I've been hearing it my whole life. and maybe those who are older than me can remember this being talked about even longer. There's one ambitious billionaire in Silicon Valley who's resorted to doing transfusions of his son's blood, thinking it's going to make him younger. Anyway, he looks horrible. So we're so fortunate, dear devotees, that we are saved from this nonsense. Not only do we not have a fear of death, we have a confidence in transitioning to Krishna's devotional service. But even in this lifetime, we know to be satisfied with what comes honestly by fair means and to focus and invest our heart in the unlimited resource of devotional service. Let's be smarter than the mad economic drive that we see today. Let's be smarter than that. We don't have to buy into that. Hare Krishna. I swear I'm done ranting and raving. Okay, we have some comments from Bella. Thank you. You're welcome. Who's Y-A-H? I'd love to meet this new devotee. I love all devotees. So make sure that we meet at some point. Dear Y-A-H. Prabhu. Lauren. Hey, Lauren. Nice to hear from you. Thank you for a relevant class. As someone who's interested in sociology, I really appreciate your approach in the first half of the class. It goes to show how timeless Srimad Bhagavatam is. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You're welcome. Hare Krishna. We just have a few minutes. Any questions or comments or retorts or challenges? Speak now or forever hold your peace. You have approximately 2 seconds. 1,
Hare
2.
Krishna.
Tarika, fastest guns in the West. Haribol Tarika Prabhu. How are you?
Well, wrong question. It's struggle in material life, but no contentions. I thank you for a very nice class. You have inspired all kinds of thought, for which there is no time left to comment. But
that wasn't intentional. I'm sorry I got carried away.
Yeah, I would love to talk about, Srila Prabhupada's comments about the economic problem, the solution to the economic problem, and his specific plans for, how to implement solutions and the part that Gita Nagari is supposed to play in that plan. Srila Prabhupada had a lot to say about this from early on. Even in some of his earliest essays, he had these concepts. But Gita Nagari is supposed to be an example of ideal life. As you mentioned, the solution to the economic problem is simple living, high thinking. What is that Sanskrit word? Nirahaya is living simply. We find that in a bunch of places.
Ahara.
Yeah. So
ahara is like eating or consuming, to not eat and consume so much.
Yeah. So and it's a principle of Vaishnava life that a devotee is supposed to live simply. So it's mentioned many times, many places throughout our literature. Maybe we have like half a minute. Maybe I can read this one quick excerpt from.
Please, Queen, we love excerpts from his
teachings of Queen Kunti, the 18th chapter. Srila Prabhupada says, it is by ignorance that people think that by opening factories they will be happy. Why should they open factories? There is no need. There is so much land, and one can produce one's own food grains and eat sumptuously without any factory. Milk is also available without a factory. The factory cannot produce milk or grains. The present scarcity of food in the world is largely due to such factories. When everyone is working in the city to produce nuts and bolts, who will produce food grains? Simple living and high thinking is the solution to economic problems. Whoops, my computer just spit me out. Simple living and high thinking is the solution to economic problems. Therefore, the Krishna consciousness movement is engaging devotees in producing their own food and living self-sufficiently, so that rascals may see how one can live very peacefully, eat the food grains one has grown oneself, drink milk, and chant Hare Krishna. And we're out of time.
Thank you, Prabhu. It's so nice to hear from Srila Prabhupada. He's reminding us again and again. Prabhupada's not afraid of repeating himself. Every time he's saying, you're not the body, you're not the body, you're not the body. And we start to get it. So similarly, he's always saying, simple living, higher thinking. Just have some milk, take care of the cow, and focus on devotional service. Someday, I hope we'll all get it. Fortunately, so many devotees at Gita Nagari, they're really doing it and showing us that it's possible. So we appreciate that so much. All right, unless there's any other burning comments or questions, which I think not, then we will finish here. Thank you, dear devotees, for tuning in. Sorry that Rajalila Mataji
Got
couldn't
another comment there from JP.
Oh, Jagannath Pandit Prabhu. Thank you for interesting. Thank you. Yes, I was reminded of Srila Prabhupada that Srila Prabhupada said in 50 years, this modern civilization will crumble. Any reference or comment as we are on the precipice. I mean, I can only speak anecdotally that I recall when I first, got in with the devotees back in 2003, and both my spiritual master, Devanamrita Swami, and Srila Prabhupada, I would hear them saying things like, society is going to crumble, it's going to collapse. I just migrated to New Zealand from Silicon Valley, California. You know what it's like. Jagannath Pandit Prabhu used to live in Fresno. You know that area. There's all this optimism. The world's just getting better and better. So I'd hear Gurudev and Prabhupada talking about how things are going down and things are going to get much worse. And I couldn't believe it. It's like, come on, this is just fear-mongering. All religions do this. The apocalypse is coming. But now, about 20-something years later, I see that they're absolutely right. Absolutely right. We're seeing the trend towards, as Gurudev said to me explicitly, right here in this room, when he stayed with us a while ago, he said, we're witnessing the dissolution of the American social fabric. And yeah, there's so many things which could happen that could cause wide-scale chaos and catastrophe. And by so many, I mean now there's 4. It used to only be 3, but now there's 4. There's the nuclear apocalypse, widespread pandemic, environmental catastrophe, and now people think that there could potentially be an AI-induced apocalypse. So any of these things could happen tomorrow. I mean, we really don't know. We really don't know. I'm not trying to indulge in fear-mongering, but we should recognize that this world is not our home. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said, this world is no place for a gentleman. Let us not invest our hope in some brighter tomorrow for this material world. We invest our hope in connection with Krishna, satisfaction from connection with Krishna. I don't think that means we should abandon the world, become doomers, and become escapists. We should try our best to improve the condition of the world, especially by spreading Krishna consciousness. But we got to be realistic. It's a wild place. We're not meant to be here. Our home is with Krishna. And I think the evidence is pointing to that more and more and more. So that's my comment. Jagannath Pandit Prabhu. Okay, we really should stop. Yes, there's so much that can be said because money, it's a gas. Hare Krishna. Thank you, dear devotees. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Nitai Gaur Premanandi, Hari Hari Bol.